It was designed to punish. It was created to kill. It was meant to showcase earthly power on the side of a hill. It was wood and rope. It was hammer and nails. It was degradation, then death. And it never failed. It was chosen to stop the Christ, to erase the message he taught. It was the bitter end of Jesus. At least, that's what they thought. It was intended to defeat, to put down, to make the disciples give up, but instead, it became the symbol of God's love. The icon of death became the icon of true living. What once marked the end is now the mark of the beginning, a mark of forgiveness, of new life, of new birth. What began at Calvary now covers the earth, over cities, over hospitals, through the streets, through homes. The picture of God's sacrifice is our picture of hope, the lasting image of our Savior and salvation's great cost. This is more than a symbol. This is the cross.
Good morning. Good to see all of you here at our Cleveland campus. Those of you who are over in the Dahlonega campus, I apologize. I can tell you right now, I'm looking right here and I can see the lights coming from one side, not the other. I was told we had lights go out on that side, so it's going to be funky looking for you guys over there in Dahlonega. But I am glad to have you. Also, those who are watching online, it's probably going to look funky for you too. But hey, we're moving on, right? A little technical difficulty there, but we're moving on. If this is your first time with us, we've been doing this series about the cross, the icon of Christianity, this symbol of the cross. And so this is the last of a 4-week series. If you didn't hear the other messages, or you weren't here, or maybe you're just joining us for the first time online, you can go to our website, you can go to our YouTube page, Facebook, Instagram, all these different places. You'll find some of those messages there. But don't worry, because this is the final message. You don't have to have heard all of them for this to make sense, but the other ones do give a context. I'd encourage you to go back and watch those. I did my graduate work in leadership. I have just always been fascinated, even from my later teen years, with leadership, kind of the art of leadership, the skill of leadership. And so when I went back and did my graduate work, it was actually in leadership. And so we read all types of, leaders and people who write on, leadership and things like that. John Maxwell is probably one of the most popular, well-known. He started out as a pastor and then moved into the corporate world. He is still somewhat a pastor to the corporate world. And he is just a genius at how he takes some complex stuff and just kind of whittles it down and puts some handlebars on it for the rest of us to be able to kind of grab it and navigate it and steer it. And so he teaches about the 5 levels of leadership. Okay? Now, I will get into the scriptures in a few moments, but if you are, especially if you're young in the room, and I'll let you define young however you want to, but you ought to take notes right here of this, because he gives some principles about leadership and the way it works in the world, that if you can learn this and apply this, it will serve you so well. For 18 years, I led an internship program, and I would teach them these principles. I sometimes will teach over at a local college, and I will teach these principles. But here are 5 levels of leadership that John Maxwell talks about and how our world operates. First one starts out with position. Position means you get a title. You get a name, a title, a position. So if you're working in fast food restaurant, they'll put a little, sticker on you, a little tag or something like that, and you may just be the checkout person, right? But eventually you might be a shift manager, right? Or an assistant manager, or a store manager, or, here at the church, it may be where, I'm the pastor, right? That's a title. And everybody says, what do I call you? And they want to know what your title is, your position. But notice John Maxwell says, this is the very basic entry-level leadership. It's level 1. Because when you have a title and you have a position, yes, you have some rights, and we focus on the rights, okay? And people listen to you because they have to. right? That's the only reason they listen to you, because they have to, because you're the boss, right? Because somehow on the organizational chart, you're a little higher than everybody else, and so you've got a title, you've got a position, they have to listen to you. Now listen, we do this in our home, okay? Dads, if you've ever said, I'm the king of the castle, you're playing to the lowest position of leadership, right? And I know, I get it. Sometimes you have to look at your kids, moms, and say, because I'm the mommy, right? That is the lowest level of leadership, lowest level of influence. And it's all about your rights, all about your title. And the only reason people listen to you is because they have to. Now, you don't want to stay there long. You want to grow to where you can get kind of the permission stage, and that is about relationships. Now people listen to you because they like you, right? There's something about you that has caused them to want to have a relationship with you, and it's your likability factor, right? Then it goes from there to production. Production means, hey, you can do something, right? You've shown some results. You made some decisions, and they were good decisions, right? You got some wins under your belt. In the sporting world, we want to get this coach over there because he wins a lot, right? And so it's production. You can produce. You can do something. Then it gets to people development. Now, it's not just what you can produce for the organization or for the family or for the business or for the church. It's now what can you do personally for people, how you make their personal lives better. You make them, a better parent. You make them, a better human being, right? And then you get all the way up to what John Maxwell says is the pinnacle as we climb the ladder of leadership, climb the level of success, right? You get to this pinnacle. It's about your identity, where you just walk in the room and people want to hear from you, right? There's people like that in our lives. I mean, if the boss, the CEO of your company or the owner of the company walks in the room, everybody acts different, right? Just because of who they are. It's not always because of their position. Sometimes it's because of this place that they have risen to out of respect. And maybe the CEO of your company is a bad example, but if we could take Billy Graham, right? He passed away, but if he was to, walk into the room, everyone would start to say, yes, sir, Mr. Graham. And I would sit down and he would take this place and he would take over because he's Billy Graham, right? If Mother Teresa passed away, but if she comes back, it's like, oh, Mother Teresa's in the room. And we would just kind of turn the mic over to her and listen. Why? Because it's Mother Teresa, right? It's not about a position. It's not about a title. I mean, it's not what she's done for our organization. It's what they have done in life in general and who they are. It is now their identity, and we just respect them. Now, this is an accurate assessment of how the world works. I would never be arrogant enough to try to correct John Maxwell. He is so much wiser, so much smarter, has such a long history. I have loved reading and learning from him, the stuff he's put out. If he walked into the room, I would shut up, I would sit down, I'd hand him the mic, and I would start taking notes, okay? Because he is here. He's here for me in my life and so many people. But that's how the world works, and he identified it and recognized it. So when you think, oh, I need to get a position and nobody will listen to me until they put me in charge, that's down here. You want to work your way through that to a place where your character has been shaped and your identity has been shaped by all those things. But now here's something else that maybe John intentionally or unintentionally did not realize, that this approach to leadership and influence, it reveals how our self-esteem and our self-worth, right? What we think of ourselves, how we hold ourselves, and our expectations of how others ought to treat us, it's all built around our performance, right? Because down here, it's just a title, it's nothing. But when we can start doing something, when we can get some wins, right? When we can make some good decisions, when we can, have some achievements, when we can get some trophies, when we can get some stuff, when we get bigger paychecks, our identity, our self-worth increases around what we do. And not only that, our expectations of how others ought to treat us increases based around what we do. Think about it. When you're meeting somebody, hey, what's your name? Oh, that's first question. Second question, and what do you do? And so for, Mother's Day is right around the corner for some of you stay-home moms, or maybe even stay-home dads. Well, what do? I'm a stay-home mom. I'm a mom. I've got a position and a title, but you know what they're asking. And you don't feel like you got the wins. And you don't feel like you got the achievements. And you don't feel like you have the stuff. And so you're just a mom, just a dad. And that is how the world works. So we're constantly competing, we're striving, we're doing all of that. And then when we get to this place of, oh man, now I've earned some respect. I've got a reputation. And you'll hear that coming out when people say, do you know who I am? Like you go into the restaurant and there's no seats available and it's like, well, I want that seat over there, just tell them to move. And it's like, sir, I'm sorry, they're already on a seat. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? You come in to the room and people don't respond the right way and you have to remind them, do you know who I am? I know pastors who are like this. Son, do you know who I am? You know, I've got people within our own kind of denomination, organization and all that, and they carry that do you know who I am syndrome. And sometimes they'll walk in the room and I'll just say something and they'll walk out and somebody goes, I can't believe you said that. Do you know who they are? And I'm like, apparently not. No, I don't. But it's the do you know who I am syndrome? And we play that. Come on, we play it in our house, right? Sweetheart, do you know who I am? I'm the man of this house. Do you know who I am? I'm the husband, right? Do you know who I am? I'm the mommy, right? You have to tell your kids that. I understand. Sometimes you have to remind your kids because I'm the mommy, right? Do you know who I am? And we expect people to change based on our achievements, our accolades, our position, but we're playing to the lowest position even when we get to the top. You see, because we get to the place where we refuse to be disregarded and disrespected. And you see this out there in the streets. I mean, you'll see, we see it in movies. Maybe some of you have lived this. You'll see it with, street gangs and stuff. I mean, they may have no education. They may have a criminal record that's a mile long, and somebody says something that's like, you're not going to talk to me like that. You know who I am? And it's like, no, I don't. And you don't have much on the chart here for me to make note of. But we just refuse to be disrespected and disregarded. Well, Jesus sits in a room full of people who are climbing the ladder, and some of them were already at the top. And it's in Luke chapter 14. It says, one Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee. This is the guy who's at the top. Do you know who that is? I mean, they didn't even put his name. I love it. The gospel writers didn't even give the guy's name, right? But do you know who that is? He's a leader. He's in charge. He's the one who's responsible not only for the religious system, but the government system of this community. And while Jesus is there, he's eating with the prominent Pharisee, and Jesus is being carefully watched because they know about him. They've heard about him. And Jesus goes on to heal a guy on the Sabbath and says, well, hey, if you had a child that was injured on the Sabbath or fell in a well, if you had an animal that fell in the well on the Sabbath, if you had wouldn't you do everything you could to help the child out of the well or to help the animal, So is it right or wrong to heal on the Sabbath? And nobody wants to answer. Nobody wants to answer because if they say yes and the crowd says, no, you're not supposed to heal on the Sabbath, well, now they're going to lose face. If they say, well, no, you're not supposed to heal on the Sabbath, and everybody goes, how cruel are you? So they're in this situation where it's like, oh, if I answer here, it's going to cost me something. So they just sit silent. They don't say anything, right? Now, here's the thing. It might surprise you that Jesus was in the home of a Pharisee because a lot of us growing up in church think there was so much animosity he would never hang out with Pharisees. But he's obviously invited to the house of a prominent Pharisee. You see, there were a lot of Pharisees who secretly followed Jesus. The Gospels tell us that. The biographies of Jesus tell us that they would secretly follow Jesus because they had to do it secretly because there was so much at stake for them. There was such a risk for them. Like if they knew that they believed in Jesus when the majority of the religious leaders were rejecting Jesus, well, that could cost them their reputation, their influence, their image, maybe some friendships. Here's the thing. They could eventually be turned out of the synagogue. Away from the synagogue. And if you're turned out of the synagogue, because realize the synagogue was like, it wasn't a church on every corner, a synagogue on every corner. It was one in each town or village, and it governed the town and the village. It wasn't just a religious center, it was their political government center as well. And so if you were a prominent Pharisee in the synagogue, that means you had voting rights. And so you get turned out of the synagogue and you lose your voting rights and you lose your influence. And then if you get turned out of the synagogue, that is such a shame because they're treating you like an unbeliever. And now you get treated like the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people. And people don't want to do business with you in the marketplace. So now there's an economic loss and a financial loss. Ultimately, all of that is because you are losing your position and lose your title. and you lose all of the rights. That is primarily what they were concerned about. They were primarily concerned about losing their position. The story goes on that while they were noticing and watching Jesus carefully, he was watching them. And he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table. And he told them this parable. You know how it is when you're sitting at the table, you got to pick the place of honor. Okay, we don't do that. We don't necessarily have places of honor at every table. I mean, maybe you have some of that in your house, but you've probably experienced this. You ever gone to a wedding and there's a buffet at the reception and you notice there's numbers on the table and you start trying to figure out, are they going to start with the top or the bottom? Because I want to sit with whichever table's going first, right? Come on, y'all played that game. Y'all are laughing. The ones who's laughing know, because you talk with your spouse and say, which way is it going today, right? So they're trying to figure out who gets to go first, who gets to sit first, and if it's, the host is in the middle of the table, somebody's going to be on the right, somebody's going to be on the left, and whoever's down there at the end, you're a bunch of nobodies. And he noticed how they were picking spots of honor. And then he says this, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished, higher on the ladder, further up the scale, may have been invited. Now, let me ask you, at a wedding feast, I love the illustration, because who are the most important people at the wedding feast? The bride and groom. Here's what Jesus is saying. When you're invited to something that's not all about you, don't make it all about you. Right? When you're invited somewhere that's not all about you, don't make it all about you. He goes on, he says, if you do this, the host who invited both of you will come and say, this person is supposed to have this seat. They're more important than you. Give this person your seat. Then humiliated, you'll have to take the least important seat. Why is that? Because if they're sitting in the middle of the table, you're sitting in the middle of the table and they're supposed to be sitting there and they're going, whoa. You need to get up. I got somebody here and that's their spot and I am just so sorry. Can you go find another seat? Nobody else is moving. And so you're left at the back of the line. You're left at the end taking the walk of shame. And they're going to be paraded up. Jesus goes on, he says, but when you're invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the guests. And then he says this most famous line you've heard, even if you've probably never read the Bible. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. I love it. Jesus uses reverse psychology on the smart, arrogant people, right? Because now all of the smart, arrogant people are having a race to the bottom because they're like, you know what I want? I want to be honored. I want to be respected. I want people when I walk in the room to go, ooh, wow, who is that? That is somebody. And Jesus just told me the secret. I go sit at the end, so when the host comes in, he's like, no, what are you doing? No, get up, everyone. I can't believe this. This is the guest of honor. And as they walk you to your seat, the little golf claps go on, and everybody's just, whoa. So Jesus is saying, no, pick the lowest seat. Then you get honored, and they're going, oh. Can you imagine the next gathering that all these guys gathered at? Hey, it's time to sit at the table. Nobody's moving. They're all like, I just wait down here. One guy's in the kitchen. He's in there like hell. It's a race to the bottom. But here's the thing. Jesus demonstrates for us exactly what he means at the Last Supper when he's the guest of honor. He's the host. And he's the one who's preparing this Passover meal for his closest followers. And he gets up from the most important position as the most important person in the room, and he washes their feet. We talked about that last week. And here's the thing. It wasn't just this reverse psychology to hear Peter and some of his other disciples go, no, you'll never wash my feet. He was saying, you don't understand, Peter. That's the whole reason I'm here. I'm here to deal with those dirty parts of your life that are humiliating and embarrassing. I'm not here just to sit in the middle where you can gather around me and worship like the king on the throne that I am. No. I'm here to come underneath you and lift you up. You see, he used reverse psychology on all the arrogant, but here's the thing, and we know how the game is played, and so that's what we do. we start playing the game to still get what we want. Honor, respect, accolades, achievements. So let me ask you this question. In the situation that you're in, the tension that you're in, whether it's tension with husband and wife, whether it's tension with your kids, whether it's tension with parents, whether it's with your neighbors, whether it's at school, whether it's with a teacher, an employer, an employee, whether it is like a hypothetical tension, meaning it's not real people, but it's those people, like you watch the news or in the, the world, the culture, the nation, and you're angry at them and the tension, whatever. Okay, whatever tension you have, let me ask you, what's the lowest position in that situation for you? What's the lowest position in that situation for you? What would it look like for you to come up underneath the one that you were trying to be over? Let me ask you a really hard question. What if you choose the lowest place and you get stuck there? Like what if you do what Jesus says and you take the lowest position and somebody in the room comes in and says, man, why in the world are you sitting here? Okay, well, whatever, have it your way, and move on. What if they say, why are you conceding to me? Why aren't you fighting back? Okay, whatever, move on. What do you mean you're letting me go first even though you were here first? Okay, well, whatever. What do you mean you're not going to fight to get credit for something I stole from you? Okay, whatever. What do you mean you're not going to try to get back part of the business that I took from you? What do you mean you're letting your lawyers go and you're just, okay, whatever. What happens if you take the lowest position and you get stuck in the lowest position? I'll tell you what will happen. It'll happen to you because it happens to me. You'll feel offended and frustrated. Offended and frustrated. That's not how it's supposed to work. See, Jesus, you're supposed to parade me in front of them, across them, up the ladder past them until I am over them. And you're going to get offended. You know what offense is? Okay, I don't know what the Webster Dictionary is. This is my definition of offense. Offense is whenever I think higher of myself than someone else thinks of me. Let me say it. When you think higher of yourself than someone else thinks of you, you think you're a great singer, and they're like, yeah, you probably should never have a microphone. I'm offended, only because you think you're a better singer than somebody else does. If you think, man, I look good in this, and they say, you going to wear that? You're offended, right? When you think, oh my gosh, I went to the gym today, and they go, are you putting on a little weight? I am offended. Right? Anytime you think better of yourself than someone else thinks, you get offended. And so if you're sitting in the spot, nobody recognized it, nobody acknowledged it, or they just left you stuck there, well, I thought somebody would have noticed I was in the kitchen washing the dishes. I thought they would have noticed that I was the one sweeping up the dirt. And you get frustrated. You get frustrated because frustration is a result of failed expectations. I had an expectation and it didn't come to pass and it failed, right? Unmet expectations. And I want to tell you what will happen. If you say, I'm following Jesus' advice, I'm going to get to the bottom and then he'll bring me up to the top, and it doesn't happen, well, now your false humility is exposed because you were just gaming the system. You see, it's nothing like seating positions to expose our dispositions, that character flaw in us. And there's nothing else like the cross of Jesus to expose our motivation of why we accept and follow Jesus. Nothing else like the cross of Jesus to expose our motivations for accepting and following Jesus, for taking his name and calling ourselves Christians. If you say, well, what's your real intent on being a Christian? What's your real intent on praying and accepting Jesus and following Jesus and trying to put all that into place? What's your real motivation and intent? And you would say, because I'm going to win. I'm going to win. I'm a child of the King. I'm going to win. And it's nothing else like the cross to expose the real motivation, because this is what Jesus said. Now, for the last few weeks, we've been reading in Luke. Today, I want to switch to Matthew. Here's what he says in Matthew when he recorded Jesus' words. Jesus said to a disciple, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, being offended, being frustrated, and all of that, and take up their cross and follow me. No. See, the cross is losing everything, losing your reputation. When you're on the cross, you've lost. And say, I want to follow Jesus to win. And he says, if you're going to be my follower, you're going to take up your cross. And there is nothing like the cross to expose our motivations, is it? And not just take up a cross and die. If you died on a cross, you might have been dying for something that you did, but you were dying for others. You see, not just Jesus, but the majority of those that Rome put on crosses were people who were fighting against Rome for the freedom of people. So if you hung on the cross, it wasn't just because you were a criminal. You know, we have this idea that there were two thieves on the cross and they got crucified because they were thieves. They didn't crucify thieves. They crucified rebels. And so these guys, they were rebelling against Rome as like Jesus was accused of rebelling against Rome. And so that means they were likely dying for fighting for others' freedom. So if you hung on a cross, chances are very likely during the time of Jesus that you hung on the cross because you were associated for giving your life for the betterment of others. That is certainly the case with Jesus. And he says, if you're going to be my follower, you need to pick up your cross and make life not about you. He goes on, for whoever wants to save their life, whoever wants to retain their reputation, whoever wants to save their prestige, whoever wants to save their title, whoever wants to save their rights and the perks and all that, you'll lose it. But whoever loses their life for me, and I love how Matthew, that's why I want to switch, because he says, it's not that you'll save it. It's not like you ever had it to hold on to. You know, you got some stuff. You got a title. You got some respect. You got some whatever. You got some stuff, and you want to hold on to it. You need Jesus to come help you hold on to it and get more of it. I love what Matthew says. No, he says, whoever loses their life for me will find it. Like, you're holding on to the wrong stuff. And when you lose your life, your eyes open and you see something that you never saw before. And now you can go after something you were never going after before. You find what life is really about. Now, I've asked you week after week, what would choosing to lose look like? But let me ask you this. What's at risk if you choose to lose? If you choose to lose to your spouse, to your kids, if you choose to lose to your business partner, if you choose to lose to that group, if we collectively just kind of choose to lose to that group, whoever that group is, and let their person, lead, what's at risk? I mean, there's our reputation, our recognition, right? There's all that. There's the image. Can I tell you something that really drives me nuts that's at risk? That they will leave or be left thinking they're right. You know what's even worse? They'll think I'm wrong. If I choose to lose and let them win, they'll think they're right. If I choose to lose, let them win, they'll think I'm wrong. Then it might cost me some money. It might cost me some possessions. If I choose to lose, I might lose the opportunity for advancement. I don't get to go up the ladder. Like if I choose to concede the position that they took from me, if I concede the idea that they stole from me, if I concede the credit that was due to me, I'll lose opportunity for advancement, for achievement, for bonuses, right? If we concede, we might lose some rights. We might lose some freedoms. We don't deal with this so much in this country, but I got friends who watch each week in other countries, and what's at risk for them is their lives. Literally, their lives. You see, this wasn't hypothetical when Jesus was talking about it, and this was not just kind of, some metaphor. It was real for them. And Jesus' followers did lay down their lives. Not just for the gospel and what they believed about Jesus, but they laid down their lives for other people to know that gospel and hear that gospel. They laid down their lives for others. So what's really at risk if you choose to lose in your situation? But here's the other thing. What's at risk if you choose not to lose? Because we don't think of it that way. We only think about what we stand to gain. Bragging rights, right? Validation. Proving that I'm right, they're wrong. But here's the thing. Some of you never thought that if you're continuing to strive, continuing to compete with your win at any cost approach, that you would lose the relationship. Because there's some of you, you may have won the argument, but you lost your spouse. You may have won the debate, but you lost your kids. Listen, you may have won the election, but you've lost your neighbors. You've lost some family. You've lost your friends. See, Jesus goes on to say this. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world and get all the way up the ladder and yet forfeit, or that word damage, injure, maybe even destroy their soul, their very self? The Greek word there is where we get the word psyche, psychological. The thing that's in your head, that's in your heart. See, here's the thing. You won the argument. You may have lost the relationship, and now you try to stand in the mirror and talk yourself up because you feel so down. You try to be a person that says, well, I was right, but you're not proud of it. I won, and you're kind of embarrassed by it. Not because you were wrong, not because they were right, but because you know you lost something that was far more valuable than that. You know, in other words, you're becoming a person that you hope your kids are not like. You're becoming a person that you hope your kids will not marry. What happens when you gain it all and you have so damaged your inner world and yourself? He goes on, or what can, and that's kind of a forward-thinking can, like would. What can or what would anyone give in exchange for their soul? Come on, some of us who are dealing with anxiety and depression, some of us who say, I'm not proud of the person in the mirror. I've done some stuff. I've got some stuff. Outwardly, the world thinks I'm a success. Financially, I am set. There are so many things that I can just, as accolades. And when I walk in the room, they know who I am. When I walk into certain rooms, everything changes because of who I am. But on the inside, it's almost like I sold my soul to the devil to get here. And if I didn't, I compromised so much that there's things on the inside, and you deal with that. What would you give to have a good night's sleep? What would you give to be at peace with yourself? What would you give for your kids to be proud of you? For those who get closer and closer and closer to you to be more and more awed and inspired by you because they know the real you. What would you give for that? And I know the answer. Everything. Everything you fought to get, to hold on to, and to claw your way to the top, you would give it all to have that. Now, let me give you some clarification here, just in case you think I'm saying, oh, so you're just telling all Christians and people here at the bridge and people over there in Dahlonega and everywhere that we're just supposed to be passive. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we're supposed to be like Jesus, and Jesus was not passive. You would not have considered him passive in one bit. It does not mean that we shouldn't throw our hat in the ring when there's time for leadership. It doesn't mean we shouldn't run for office. It doesn't mean that you don't stick your hand up and volunteer because you've got talents and abilities and skills and intellect and experience and all those things. It doesn't mean that you just sit back. It doesn't mean that you just lay down and take it and just roll over. It doesn't mean any of those things. What it means is we need to check our motives. We need to check what's really behind what's driving us. What is the truest and deepest intentions of our heart? And we can say a lot of noble things, but Jesus was looking at the heart. And he knew what was driving them was no different than everybody else. What was driving those religious leaders was no different than the irreligious people. And that's what he's saying. You see, I think Jesus gives us, or God gives us the talent, the abilities, the drive, and the wants and the desires and all of that. And it's why sometimes we're moved to throw our hat in the ring, and why we stand up, why people run for office. And again, we should do that, but we should do that very differently. You see, Jesus leads his followers into a way of life that is opposite of the culture, and it is opposite of our corrupted human nature. So let me go back to that John Maxwell thing, because that is very much how the world works when it comes to leadership. But I want you to look at it this way, because this is Jesus' descent into greatness. And he ran it backwards, because it starts with this pinnacle of identity and who he is. And when you read the Gospels and you see, before he ever did a miracle, before he ever taught a lesson, before he ever called the first follower, before anybody even knew him other than his cousin, John the Baptist, he goes and submits himself and humbles himself and comes under the teaching, under the authority and the teaching of his cousin, John the Baptist, who's supposed to be pointing everybody to Jesus. And he says, no, I'm going to come under what you're doing. I'm going to start with what you're doing. I'm going to pick up on your thing, not impose mine. And as he comes up out of that water of baptism, it says that he hears a voice that says, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." To which we would go, he ain't done nothing yet. He got wet. He hadn't taught nothing. He doesn't have any followers. Nobody knows who he is. And Jesus says, yeah, because my identity doesn't come from what I do. It comes from whose I am. And so our identity should come from our Heavenly Father, or to make it even kind of more practical, our identity comes from being a follower of Jesus. He chose us. That's it. But you hadn't done nothing. In fact, you're good for nothing. In fact, you're kind of a scoundrel. And what you have done is pretty bad. And it's like, yeah. So where do you think you got your identity? He showed up and invited me and chose me when he's making the team. He showed up and wants me on the team. What have you done? Nothing that deserves being on the team. You're not even that smart. I know. You see, now by doing it this way, we're not defined by what we do and what we achieve. And so now we're taken out of the rat race from having to compete, claw, and scrape, and hold. And then we go from that to people development. Because what Jesus do, as soon as he comes out, he just starts going to people. And he starts doing what is best for people, right? And he doesn't go to just any people. He goes to the sinners and the outcast and the not good enough people. And he comes up underneath them to lift them up. And here's the thing. When he's trying to make decisions of what to do and what's best, he says what's best is what's best for people. You know what's best? You know what's best for the person that you're having a conflict with? What's best for them is what's best for them, not you. Well, yeah, but I can tell you what's best in this situation. First of all, they need to acknowledge who I am and my authority. That's not best for them. That's best for you. You see, Jesus came along, and people didn't even know who he was, and he healed people, and they said, who healed you? I don't know. Blind guy. Who was it that healed you? I didn't see him, okay? I was blind. He walked off. When I opened my eyes, I don't know. Well, I thought Jesus was doing it to get all the credit. Obviously not. He was just doing it because of people. And the people that we would not be interested in were the very ones he was interested in. And then he starts doing some miracles, like big miracles. And then he starts teaching, and then he starts getting a following. And then he has some wins under his belt, right? But before, all he had was losers under his belt, a couple of, fishermen and some outcasts. But now he's got some wins under his belt. He can calm storms and seas, and wow, we want him on the team. That guy can win, right? But even with all of his miracles, it was always for the benefit of others. And here we are with our spiritual gifts and our supernatural abilities, and we make them about us. We're so proud that we can speak in tongues. We got a word, and that gives us some kind of authority. But Jesus never used all of his gifts that way. It was always for the benefit of others. And then after that, way after all of that, some people said, I'm really starting to trust him. I trust him, and I'm going to follow him. And I'm going to adjust my life to be as close as I can to him. And then, only then, do they say, you're my king, you're my savior, and you're my God. Now, he could have come in and said, hey guys, I'm your savior, I'm your God, and I'm your king. You know who I am? Come on, guys, let's get it together. But he didn't. In fact, when somebody said, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's right, but I don't want y'all telling anybody. What do you mean don't tell anybody? They got to figure it out for themselves. Because I'm not here to parade around my title and my position. Listen, people kill for titles and positions. The Greek Empire did it. The Roman Empire did it, the Egyptian Empire did it, the Babylonian Empire did it, and the American way of life, we do it. We still do it. If you look back at the Greeks and the Romans and the Caesars and the Egyptian pharaohs, they didn't age out. In most cases, they were taken out by somebody else who wanted the title and position. And we do the same thing. We just use our words. And we do the same thing in our family, because you can get on the phone and talk about your cousin or your sister or whatever and all that kind of stuff. Before the family gets together for the reunion, you've done taken them out. You do it in your job. You do it at school. We do it at church. We do it all over the place. We still kill for the title and the position. And anybody who finally gets the title and the position, whether it's the pastor or whatever, we're going to tear that down, because title and positions, that's what we all fight for. It's what they killed Jesus for. Because when he hung on the cross, they stick a sign up that says, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And the religious leaders come and say, no, 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 no. You need to say that he claimed to be King of the Jews. You see, they were arguing over the title and the position, and they didn't want him to have it. That's how we are, isn't it? Fighting each other over title and positions. People not only kill others for title and positions, we kill ourselves for it. Man, I've been slaving and working and this, and you've been doing all that you can to get the title and position. And we think we cannot lead effectively or influence widely without that title and position, right? In order to lead effectively, in order to influence widely, we're required to have a title and a position, right? So I remember a story. This is true. For about 18 years, I had an internship program. And we'd go around to churches and schools and stuff, and they would do dramas and illustrations, and had a young lady who was in charge of the drama. Now, there was one young man, he was with us for 4 years in this internship program. He's his 4th year. A girl who was only in it for 2 years was leading all of the drama and teaching all the students and doing all of that. And it was not going well. Some of them didn't like the drama. Some of them didn't like the part they had in the drama. Some of them didn't like each other. And so it just wasn't going well. And so the 4th year student comes into my office and plops down and says, man, this is terrible and this is awful. And I said, well, shoot, go in there and fix it. I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? Then he said, well, you didn't put me in charge. She's in charge. I said, what? Well, she's the director. And I remember going, he's the director. And I was like, oh, I can fix that. I walked him. I said, come on. I didn't say anything. I just walked into there and I said, hey, guys, I don't have time to go through all of this. You're going to have to trust me. Know that my heart's in the right place for all of you. Listen, you're doing an okay job, but I don't need you to be the director. He's now the director. Okay, everybody? He's now in charge, all right? Because we got to get this thing on the road. Ready? Okay, I'm out. 5 minutes later, he's back in my office. He goes, what the heck was that? I put you in charge. You didn't think you could do nothing without the title and the position. I just gave it to you. He said, well, nobody's listening to me. And I said, you're exactly right, because it had nothing to do with the title and position. It had everything to do with how you've conducted yourself with these people for the last 3 years. You see, we think we have to have the title and the position, and Jesus never did. He never thought that. In fact, we talked about this last week. He laid the title and position of God aside and became a servant. Now, Jesus is leading his disciples to Jerusalem to face the cross. And in Mark chapter 10, it says, they are on their way up to Jerusalem, because no matter where you are on the map, it's always up. Jerusalem's on a hill. And Jesus was leading the way. And the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. You know why they're astonished and afraid? Because he just told them, hey guys, we're going to go to Jerusalem and they're going to kill me. It's not going to go good. It's not going to be good. And they're like, well, let's not go there. Last time we were there, they tried to stone you to death. Well, this time they're going to succeed. And so here he is leading the way. Come on, guys, come on. Why are y'all dragging? Come on, why are y'all poking? Right? Come on, let's go. He's driving this thing. And they're astonished, and the other ones are scared to death. And in that setting, he then pulls aside, even as they're on the way, and he tells them a second time what's going to happen when they get there. And after that kind of gets out of his mouth, and they've made a few, steps down the path, it says, then James and John pull up from the rear, kind of get beside him, the sons of Zebedee, come to him and say, teacher, we want you to do whatever we ask. Don't you have kids that do that? Mom, Dad, I need to ask you for something. Can you say yes? What am I asking? Just say yes. Your kids ever do that? Mine did that every now and then, right? Okay? Just say yes. Well, no, you got to tell me. And so Jesus says, okay, well, what is it you want? And here's what they said. Lord, let us sit on your right and the other on your left in your glory. Now, he's just told them what's going to happen when you get to Jerusalem. But they can't fathom it because this has all just been illustration. It's been hyperbole. It's kind of what y'all are doing when we talk about, is he really serious about this cross stuff? Jesus was deadly serious. And they're not getting it and they don't understand it because he's not going to go on a cross. And even if he does, something's going to happen. It's going to be a sleight of hand, something, whatever. And then they're going to see he's more than just a man. He's more than just a teacher. He's more than just a rabbi. He's more than just a Jewish guy. They're going to see the glory. Yeah, he's bigger than that. And when they all realize just what a big deal you are and how awesome you are, when you walk in the room and everybody's like, do you know who that is? When you walk in the room and you're like, do y'all know who I am? Can I be on the right and he on the left? That's going to be an awesome entrance right there. When you come into your kingdom and your glory, you're going to need number 2, number 3. And Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup I drink? Or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? And they said, sure we can. Bring it on. He's like, no, you don't understand. They don't even know what he's saying there. Can you drink the cup of suffering in order to do what I'm going to do, to have the position that I'm going to have? And they're like, sure. Because that's like every little intern that says, oh yeah, I'll pay the price. Do you know what it took for me to get where I'm at? Oh yeah, I can do that. He's like, you don't have any idea what you're asking. See, you're comparing this to the world system. See, you're just thinking, hey, I'm paying my dues and taking the persecution and the hits so I can get to the top. You don't realize how low to the bottom I'm going. I'm going to be immersed, baptized, immersed in suffering and ridicule and humiliation and rejection. And I'm not doing it so that somebody can come to the end and go, oh, no, move on up here. I'm doing it because every person I'm dying for is worth it. They're worth it. I'm doing it because I sincerely love them. Do you think you can drink from the cup where everything you're chasing, in fact, the thing that would cause you to come here and ask me that question, you would give all of that up and whatever you think comes with it? Because you love somebody who won't love you back, who may never thank you, who may never acknowledge you, and they may never change. But they're worth it. But they're worth it. See, they're quick to say, oh yeah, we can do that. And he's like, you don't know. Eventually they do that. After Jesus is resurrected and ascended and the Holy Spirit comes, you can keep reading in history and they do that. But the story goes on. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant. And they're not mad because it was an inappropriate time to ask the question. They're mad because these 2 jokers beat them to the question. I mean, come on. If he's going to have a number 2 and number 3, Peter ought to be in there. I mean, any of us could be in there. And so Jesus hears them because they break into an argument about who's the greatest among them. And so it says, Jesus calls them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, and right now Gentiles, non-Jewish people, but specifically the Romans, you know how this works, right? The rulers of the Gentiles, they lord it over them. They just love to be further up the chain, right? They just love to be at a place of leadership and influence, that they could lord it and control people and tell people what to do and have the respect of people. But it's not just them, right? I mean, we're here in Jerusalem and Middle East and all that. They have people all the way back in Rome, some high officials who have authority over them. It goes all the way up to the Caesar, right? And so you know how the pecking order works. And they're like, yeah, we know exactly how it works. That's why we're up here. That's why we snuck to the front of the line and said, let us be number 2, number 3. We know exactly how the world system works. And he says, not so with you. My followers aren't going to do it that way. Not so with you. You ought to be different and it ought to be noticeable. It ought to be noticeable in election years. It ought to be noticeable when you're contentious and fighting. It ought to be noticeable when you're throwing your hat in the ring to lead. It ought to be noticeable how different you go about it. Instead, whoever wants to become great, and nothing wrong with wanting to become great, I think God puts the desire in us to want to influence. But if you want to influence and do it greatly, you must be servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave. How many rights does a slave have? How many responsibilities does a slave have? You see, the slave has no personal rights but takes responsibility for the ones they serve. For even the Son of Man, when he comes in the room, you know who that is? Oh yeah, we all know who that is. When he comes in the room and it's like, oh, Son of Man is here, drop the mic, hand it over, we'll all sit down. He's like, no. I didn't come here to take the mic and have you all sit down. I came here to get up underneath every single one of you and lift you up. He did not come to be served, he came to serve. And to give his life, nobody took it, nobody demanded, and he didn't lose. He gave it as a ransom. You know what a ransom is? Giving something up you value for something you value more. Like all the stuff you work hard for, all the stuff you scrape and save for, all the stuff you invest in to get more of, all the titles, all the stuff, all the achievements and everything else. When they kidnap your child, you'll give it all away to have them back. A ransom is something you value in exchange for something you value more. You see, the cross of Jesus is not just an icon of Jesus' sacrifice for us. It's also his invitation to us to live sacrificially for others. For people who don't ask us, won't thank us, won't love us, and may never change. That is hard. That is hard. Whether you wear it on your necklace, whether you wear it in your ears, whether you put it as a tattoo, whether you have it on your car, it's not just hey, I identify with the guy who died for me. It's saying, I'm climbing up on the cross and following the guy who died for me. I'm going to do for others what this guy did for me. It means we look for opportunities to give ourselves away. We look for opportunities to give ourselves away, not because of what it gets us, but because they're worth it. It's the opportunity to give it away because the opportunity is slipping away. I don't know if you've ever done this where you maybe driven by somebody, whether they're homeless or in need or whatever the case may be. You didn't think much about it, but it just sticks with you, and you're like, I should have done something. And you turn around and go back, and they're gone. Or you turn around and go back, and somebody else is meeting the need. And at first you're like, oh, good. But there's times where I drive away going, I didn't help them, but I think I just harmed me. I didn't help them, but I think I might have just harmed me. I think I might have just made my heart a little harder and a little more calloused. And I think I might have just gained my freedom and kept my money, which is my world. But I think I might have forfeited my soul. Have you ever had that? You see, the cross means we consume less so we can give more. The cross means we give up rights and we take on responsibility for others. The cross may mean for some of us that we stop trying to win the argument, win the fight, win the election, and we start trying to win them, whoever they are. How do you do this? Well, you have to adjust your view of you. And then you have to adjust your view of those around you. And the way that you do that is by focusing your view on Jesus and what he's done for you. And then you do for others what he's done for you. Pick up the cross and follow. Let me remind you, choosing to lose won't make you a loser. It makes us more like our Savior. Can you imagine if just a significant enough people in a population center like ours, if just enough of us did this for any amount of time, what it might change, if not the world, what it might change when it comes to the reputation of people who call themselves Christians. What it might change when it comes to the impression people have of Jesus. They may never agree with us, but they'll want their kids to be more like us. They may never agree with us, but they will want to work with us. They may never agree with us, but they'll want their kids to marry ours. And you never know. You never know. They might just choose to become one of us. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, this has been a hard and tough series for all of us, starting with me. So God, would you help us by your Holy Spirit? Lord, we know that even coming into a relationship with you begins with choosing to lose and admitting we can't fix ourselves, we can't help ourselves, we can't solve our situations. And so we have to call on you for help and choose to submit and choose to lose and choose to confess that we're wrong on some things, maybe about everything. So in order to win with you, we have to choose to lose to ourselves. God, would you help us? Would you help us to prioritize people above positions and power and prestige? Among all of those things that we're conditioned to go after. Lord, help us to be so different that it's noticeable. Heavenly Father, use us in whatever way you want to use us. If it's to use us to bring people to you, then so be it. But Lord, if it's just to use people to come under, or use us to come under people, lift them up like you did. But God, would you help us? Help us to pick up our cross, to die to ourselves, and to die for people that you died for. It's in the name of your Son. It's by his example, it's his teachings, it's everything that we know about him that we want to be. Those are the reasons I ask you this.